The clock on the kitchen wall showed 8:30 in the evening. When Lisa noticed something was different about David, he kept looking at his phone every few minutes, then glancing toward their bedroom door with this weird expression on his face. She'd been dating him for 8 months now, and she knew all his moods. This wasn't his usual calm self. "You okay over there?" she asked, looking up from her laptop where she'd been answering work emails on the couch. David jumped a little, like he'd forgotten she was there. Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking about something." But he wasn't fine. Lisa could tell because he was doing that thing where he runs his hand through his hair. When he's nervous, he'd done the same thing before their first dinner with her parents. And when he had to give that big presentation at work last month, she closed her laptop and really looked at him. He was wearing his favorite blue shirt, the one she'd bought him for his birthday. His hair looked like he'd actually tried to style it, which was unusual for a regular Tuesday night at home. And was that cologne she smelled? "David, seriously, what's going on? You're acting weird." He walked over and sat on the edge of the coffee table, facing her. His hands were shaking a little, which made her heart skip. The last time she'd seen him this nervous was when he thought he was going to lose his job. But this felt different. There was excitement mixed in with the nerves. "I have something for you," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Well, not exactly. For you. More like something I want to show you." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Okay, show me." "That's the thing. I need some time to get it ready. Maybe 20 minutes, 30 at most." He stood up and gently took her shoulders, positioning her back against the couch cushions. "I just need you to stay right here, okay? Why can't I help you with whatever it is?" "Because it's a surprise, and surprises don't work if you see them before they're ready." He was smiling now, that crooked smile that had made her fall for him in the first place. But there was something else in his eyes, something that looked almost like fear. "What kind of surprise takes 30 minutes to set up in our bedroom?" she asked, laughing. "Are you building furniture in there? Just trust me, okay? Please?" He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I promise it'll be worth the wait. But you have to promise me something too." "What?" "Promise me you won't peek. No matter how curious you get, no matter what you hear, just stay out here. Can you do that?" For me, Lisa studied his face, and all the time they'd been together, David had never been the type for big romantic gestures. He was more the kind of guy who showed love through small things like bringing her coffee in bed, or remembering she liked extra pickles on her sandwiches. This careful planning was completely new territory for him. "You're really serious about this, aren't you?" Dead serious. She could see how important this was to him. Whatever he was planning, it meant something big. The nervous energy coming off him was almost contagious, and she found herself getting excited even though she had no idea what to expect. "All right. I promise. No peeking." "Thank you." The relief on his face was obvious. He squeezed her hand once, then headed toward the bedroom. At the doorway, he turned back. "Oh, and if you get bored, there's that book you've been trying to finish on the side table. The one I started 3 weeks ago and keep falling asleep during. That's the one." He grinned. "Maybe tonight you'll finally get past chapter 4. With that, he disappeared into the bedroom, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Lisa picked up the book, but she couldn't concentrate on the words. Her mind was racing with possibilities. What could he possibly be doing in there? They'd talked about moving in together more seriously, but that conversation had only happened last week. Was this about that? Or maybe it was something for Christmas, even though it was still 2 weeks away. From behind the bedroom door, she heard the sound of something being moved across the floor. Then silence, then more movement. David was definitely rearranging furniture. Or something heavy. She tried to focus on her book, but the words just blurred together on the page. Her curiosity had always been her weakness as a kid. She'd been the one to find all the hidden Christmas presents and peek at them through the wrapping paper. She'd read ahead in every book series, even when she knew it would spoil the surprise. She just couldn't help herself when it came to mysteries, and this was definitely a mystery. Another sound came from the bedroom. Was that David talking to himself? She strained to listen, but couldn't make out the words. Then she heard what sounded like something falling, followed by a quiet curse word. "Everything okay in there?" She called out. "Yeah, all good. Just give me a few more minutes." But his voice sounded strained. Whatever he was doing, it wasn't going as smoothly as he'd planned. Lisa felt a mix of affection and amusement. This was so typical of David, trying to do something special for her and probably making it way more complicated than it needed to be. She loved him for it, though. She loved how much he cared about making things perfect for her, even when she would have been happy with simple. She loved how he remembered tiny details about what she liked and didn't like. She loved how safe she felt with him, how he made her laugh even on her worst days. 8 months might not seem like a long time to some people, but with David, it felt like she'd found something she'd been looking for her whole life without even knowing she was searching for it. The sounds from the bedroom continued, more moving, more shuffling. And what might have been the sound of paper rustling? Paper. What could he be doing with paper? Lisa forced herself to look back at her book. But the mystery behind that door was so much more interesting than anything happening on the pages in front of her. 20 minutes had passed, and Lisa had read the same paragraph for times without understanding a single word. The sounds coming from their bedroom were driving her absolutely crazy. Every few minutes, she heard something new that made her imagination run wild. First, there was the sound of their dresser being moved. She could tell because it made that specific scraping noise against the hardwood floor. That always made her cringe. Then she heard what sounded like David opening and closing drawers, followed by the rustle of papers. Lots of papers. What on earth is he doing in there? She whispered to herself, setting the book down in her lap. Then came a sound that made her sit up straight. It was definitely David's voice. But he was talking to himself in that way people do when they're concentrating really hard on something. She caught fragments of words, but couldn't make out what he was saying. "Come on, David," she heard him mutter, followed by what sounded like tape being pulled off a roll. Tape? Why would he need tape? Lisa found herself leaning forward on the couch, straining to hear better. This was torture. She'd always been the kind of person who needed to know things right away. When they watched movies together, she was the one constantly asking what's going to happen next, even though David would always tell her to just wait and see. But this was different. This was happening in real time, just a few feet away from her, and she had no idea what was going on. Another sound made her jump. Something had definitely fallen in there, and it wasn't light. David let out a frustrated sigh that she could hear clearly through the door. "You okay?" she called out, trying to keep her voice casual. "Yeah, just give me 5 more minutes." "Okay, maybe 10. Sorry, this is taking longer than I thought. 10 more minutes?" Lisa looked at the clock. He'd already been in there for almost half an hour. Her curiosity was reaching a breaking point. She tried to distract herself by scrolling through her phone, but even her social media couldn't hold her attention. Every sound from the bedroom pulled her focus right back. She heard more tape. Then what sounded like David moving around the room. Was he hanging something on the walls? The sound was too muffled to tell for sure, but it definitely seemed like he was putting things up. Then she heard him talking to himself again, but this time she caught a few words. "No. That one goes over there," he said, apparently to no one. "And this one, where did I put?" Lisa bit her lip. The curiosity was actually physical now, like an itch she couldn't scratch. She promised not to peek, and she never broke promises to David. But this was becoming impossible to ignore. She stood up from the couch and walked to the kitchen, thinking maybe getting some water would help distract her. But even from the kitchen, she could still hear everything. The apartment wasn't that big, and sound traveled easily through their thin walls. More rustling, more movement, and then a sound that made her freeze with the water glass halfway to her lips. David was definitely hanging things on the walls. She could hear the small tapping sound of him putting tiny nails or pushpins into the drywall. What could he possibly be hanging up that required so many separate pieces? "This is killing me," she said quietly to herself, setting the glass down on the counter. She walked back toward the living room, but found herself stopping in front of the bedroom door. It was closed, but she noticed there was a thin line of warm, flickering light coming from underneath. Flickering light meant candles. David had lit candles in their bedroom. Her heart started beating faster. Candles were romantic. Combined with all the other sounds, all the careful preparation, this was definitely something big. But what? The rational part of her brain tried to come up with explanations. Maybe he was setting up a romantic dinner in the bedroom? But then why all the tape and paper sounds? Maybe he bought her a gift and was creating some elaborate way to present it that would explain the hanging things on walls. But none of her guesses felt quite right. There was something else going on, something she couldn't figure out from just the sounds. She pressed her ear closer to the door, feeling guilty but unable to stop herself. David was moving around again, and she could hear his footsteps on the hardwood. He seemed to be walking in a pattern, like he was navigating around things on the floor. Perfect, she heard him say softly. Then, a moment later, no, wait, that's not right. More movement, more rustling of papers. Lisa realized her hands were actually shaking from curiosity. This was worse than waiting for Christmas morning when she was a kid. At least then, she could shake the presents and make educated guesses. This was a complete mystery. She backed away from the door and returned to the couch, trying to look innocent in case David came out and caught her listening. But sitting still was becoming impossible. Her leg bounced nervously, and she kept glancing at the bedroom door every few seconds. The sounds continued. Sometimes there would be a few minutes of silence, and Lisa would think he was almost done. Then more movement would start up again. At one point, she was sure she heard him moving the small chair from the corner of their room. "What are you doing in there?" she whispered, even though she knew he couldn't hear her. The clock now showed that he'd been in there for 45 minutes. This wasn't just a simple surprise anymore. This was a project, a big one. And Lisa's willpower was cracking with every passing minute. She found herself standing up again, drawn toward the bedroom like a magnet. The promise she'd made felt less important now than finding out what was happening behind that door. David would understand, wouldn't he? Anyone would be curious after this long. She took a step toward the bedroom, then stopped, then another step. Her heart was pounding now, and she knew she was about to break her promise. But she just couldn't help herself anymore. Lisa stood frozen in the hallway, her heart beating so loud she was sure David could hear it through the door. She knew she was about to break her promise, but the curiosity had become too much to handle. She had to know what he was doing in there. She took one more step toward the bedroom, moving as quietly as possible. The old floorboard near the door always creaked, so she carefully stepped around it. Her bare feet made no sound on the hardwood as she got closer and closer to the mystery. Behind that door, the warm, flickering light was still coming from underneath, and she could smell something sweet in the air. Was that vanilla? David must have lit her favorite candles, the one she bought last month that made their whole apartment smell like a bakery. She pressed herself against the wall next to the door frame, taking a deep breath. Her hands were actually sweating now. This felt like sneaking around as a kid, trying to catch a glimpse of Santa on Christmas Eve, except she was a grown woman, and this was her boyfriend, not some magical holiday figure from inside the room. She heard David moving around again. His footsteps were careful, like he was trying not to step on something. Then she heard him sigh, followed by what sounded like him sitting down on the floor. "Come on, get it together," she heard him whisper to himself. "She's going to love this. Stop overthinking it." Lisa's heart melted a little. Even when he was stressed, David was thinking about making her happy. Whatever this surprise was, he really cared about getting it right for her. She took another step closer to the door. It was slightly open, maybe an inch or two. Just enough for someone to peek through if they really wanted to. And boy, did she want to. Lisa knew this was wrong. She promised him she wouldn't look. But her curiosity had completely taken over any sense of guilt she might have felt. She needed to see what was in there. Moving slowly, she positioned herself where she could see through the crack in the door. At first, All she could see was the flickering light from the candles. Then her eyes adjusted, and what she saw made her put her hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. The bedroom looked completely different. David was sitting in the middle of the floor, surrounded by what looked like hundreds of small pieces of paper. They were everywhere, somewhere, taped to the walls in neat rows. Others were hanging from strings that stretched across the room like a spider web made of memories. More papers were scattered on the floor around him, and he was holding several in his hands, looking at them like he was trying to decide where they should go. But it wasn't just the papers that made her gasp. The whole room had been transformed. He'd moved all their furniture to the edges, creating an open space in the center. The candles were placed carefully around the room, casting dancing shadows on the walls. And in the very middle of it all, on the floor next to where David was sitting, was a small wooden box she'd never seen before. Lisa squinted, trying to read what was written on the papers. From her hiding spot by the door, she could make out David's handwriting on each one, but they were too far away to read the actual words, whatever he'd written. There were a lot of them, way more than she would have expected. As she watched, David picked up one of the papers from the pile next to him and read it silently. A small smile crossed his face, and he carefully taped it to the wall near the window. Then he picked up another one, frowned a little, and moved it to a different spot on the floor. He was arranging them in some kind of pattern, she realized. This wasn't random. There was a system to where each paper was going, though she couldn't figure out what it was from where she was standing. David reached for the tape again, but knocked over a small stack of papers in the process. They scattered across the floor, and he let out a frustrated sound. Perfect, he muttered sarcastically, crawling around to collect the fallen papers. Real smooth, David. Lisa watched as he gathered them up, being careful not to crumple any of them. Whatever was written on those papers, they were important to him, important enough that he was treating each one like it was precious. As he organized the papers again, Lisa caught a glimpse of his face in the candlelight. He looked nervous, yes, but there was something else there too. He looked happy, excited, even like a kid working on a secret project that he couldn't wait to show off. She'd never seen this side of David before. He was usually so laid back, so casual about everything. But this was different. This mattered to him in a way that made her chest feel tight with emotion. He stood up then, stepping carefully around the papers on the floor, and walked to the far wall. Lisa shifted slightly to get a better view and saw him hang another paper, this one on a piece of string that connected to papers on the opposite wall. He stepped back, looked at his work, and nodded to himself. Okay, she heard him say quietly. Just a few more, and then he trailed off as he noticed something. One of the papers near the bed had come untaped and was hanging at an angle. David walked over to fix it, and as he did, Lisa got her first clear look at what was actually written on the papers, even from her distance. She could see that each piece of paper had just a few lines of text. They looked like notes, short ones. And suddenly, Lisa realized what she was looking at. These weren't just random papers. These were memories. David had written down memories of their relationship, and he was creating some kind of display with them. All of this, the candles, the careful arrangement, the wooden box in the center. It was all for her. The realization hit her like a wave. David had spent hours, maybe days, writing down moments from their time together. Things he remembered, things that had mattered to him. And now he was turning their bedroom into a museum of their love story. Lisa felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She'd never had anyone pay attention to her like this before. Never had someone think their relationship was worth documenting in such a detailed, careful way. She was so focused on watching David work, so amazed by what he created, that she didn't notice when she leaned a little too far forward. Her shoulder brushed against the door, making it creak slightly. David's head snapped up immediately, looking directly at the door. For a moment, they stared at each other through the gap, Lisa's face visible in the candlelight. David's expression changing from concentration to surprise to something that might have been embarrassment. Neither of them moved for what felt like forever. Time seemed to stop as Lisa and David stared at each other through the crack in the door. She could see the exact moment when he realized she'd been watching him. When his face went from focused concentration to complete surprise, her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Lisa." David's voice came out as barely a whisper. She pushed the door open a little wider, feeling like a kid who'd been caught with her hand in the cookie jar. "I'm sorry," she said. Quickly, I promised I wouldn't peek. But I heard all these sounds and I just couldn't help myself and I'm really, really sorry." David was still sitting on the floor in the middle of all those papers. A piece of tape stuck to his cheek and his hair messy from running his hands through it. He looked at her for a long moment, then down at the chaos around him, then back at her. "You weren't supposed to see it like this," he said, his voice full of disappointment. "I had this whole plan. You were supposed to walk in when everything was perfect, when all the papers were in the right spots and the candles were arranged better, and I had time to clean up all this mess." He gestured helplessly at the scattered papers around him, some of which had gotten mixed up when he'd knocked them over earlier. Lisa could see frustration written all over his face, like he thought he'd ruined everything. "David," she said softly, stepping fully into the room. She had to be careful where she put her feet because there were papers everywhere. "What is all this?" Instead of answering right away, he picked up one of the papers near him and held it out to her. His hand was shaking a little. "Here, read this one." Lisa took the small piece of paper and looked down at David's familiar handwriting. In blue ink, he'd written, "The first time she fell asleep during a movie and denied it the next morning. She was snoring, but I didn't tell her because she looked so peaceful." She looked up at him, confused. "You wrote about me falling asleep during movies?" "That one's from our third date," David said, his voice getting a little stronger. "We were watching that action movie you picked, and you fell asleep 20 minutes in. But the next day, you asked me how it ended, like you'd watched the whole thing." Lisa remembered that night. She'd been so embarrassed about falling asleep that she pretended she'd seen the whole movie. She had no idea David had noticed, let alone that he thought it was worth remembering. "Read another one," he said, pointing to a paper that was taped to the wall near her. This one said, "The way she hums when she's cooking, even though she doesn't realize she's doing it." Usually old songs from the radio. "And that one," David continued, pointing to another paper hanging from a string, "and that one over there by the window." Lisa walked carefully around the room, reading paper after paper. Each one contained a small memory from their relationship, written in David's careful handwriting. Some of them were about big moments, like their first kiss or the day they said they loved each other. But most of them were about tiny things she didn't even remember doing. The way she always steals the blankets, but then shares them when she realizes what she's done. How she talks to my mom on the phone longer than I do. The face she makes when she's trying not to laugh at her own jokes. That Tuesday morning when she made me coffee and drew a heart in the foam. Even though she was running late for work, Lisa remembered that Tuesday. She'd been rushing around the apartment, trying to find her keys and her work badge. But she'd still taken the time to make David's coffee the way he liked it. She'd drawn the heart without thinking about it, just because it made her happy to do something nice for him. "David," she whispered, looking around at all the papers. There had to be at least 50 of them, maybe more. "How long did this take you?" "I've been working on it for about 3 weeks, he said, still sitting on the floor. "Every time I remembered something new about us, I'd write it down. I started keeping a little notebook with me so I wouldn't forget anything." Lisa felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "You've been carrying around a notebook to write down things about me, about us," he corrected, "about all the little things that make us work. I know some people think 8 months isn't that long to be together, but Lisa, I notice everything about you. Every single day with you matters to me." She knelt down next to him on the floor, careful not to disturb any of the papers, up close. She could see that some of the notes were older than others. The ink had faded on a few, like they'd been written weeks ago. Others looked fresh, like he'd added them just today. "This one," she said, picking up a paper near her knee, the way she always orders dessert but only eats half, then offers me the rest even though she knows I'm going to say yes. She looked at him. I do that every single time we go out to eat. I know, David said, smiling for the first time since she'd walked into the room, and I love it every single time. Lisa continued reading, moving from paper to paper. Some of the memories made her laugh, like the one about how she always tried to give directions while looking at the map upside down. Others made her heart ache in the best way, like the note about how she'd held his hand during the scary parts of horror movies, even though she was more scared than he was. David. This is incredible, she said, looking round the room again. But why? What's all this for? That's when she noticed the wooden box again, sitting in the center of the floor like everything else was arranged around it. David followed her gaze and took a deep breath. That's the part you really weren't supposed to see yet, he said. I was going to have you read all the papers first, so you'd understand what I was trying to say. And then he reached for the box, his hands shaking again. This isn't what you think it is, he said quickly. I mean, it might be someday, but that's not what this is about right now. Lisa's heart was racing again, but this time it wasn't from curiosity. It was from the look in David's eyes, like he was about to say something that would change everything between them. Then what is it about? She asked softly. David opened the wooden box with careful fingers, and inside, nestled in soft white fabric, was a single silver key. Lisa stared at the silver key nestled in the white fabric, her mind racing to understand what it meant. It was small and simple, the kind that might open a door or a mailbox. But the way David was holding the box, like it contained something incredibly precious, told her this key was much more important than it looked. What does it open? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David took a shaky breath. A front door. On Maple Street, about 10 minutes from here. It's got a big kitchen window that faces east so you get morning sun while you drink your coffee. And there's a little garden in the back where you could grow those herbs. You're always talking about planting. Lisa felt her heart skip a beat. David, what are you saying? I'm saying I found us a place, he said, his words coming out in a rush now. Together, a real place, not just your apartment or my apartment, but our apartment, somewhere we can build a life together. She looked around the room again, at all the papers documenting their relationship, and suddenly everything made sense. This wasn't just about showing her that he remembered things about her. This was about showing her that he wanted to keep making memories with her. You did all this, she said, gesturing at the papers, to ask me to move in with you? I did all this to show you that I love you, David said, setting the box down carefully on the floor between them. Really love you, not just the big moments, but all the tiny, everyday things that most people don't even notice. I wanted you to see that I pay attention to who you are, not just when you're happy or when you look perfect, but when you're humming, while you cook, or when you're grumpy in the morning before your coffee. Lisa picked up another paper from the floor. This one said, how she always checks the locks twice before bed because it makes her feel safer, and how I never tell her I already checked them, because I know it's important to her. You do that? She asked, looking up at him. Every night, David said. You check the front door, then the back door, then the front door again, and every night. I watch you do it and think about how much I love that you want to feel safe in your own home. How much I want to be the person who helps you feel that way. Tears were definitely falling now, but Lisa didn't try to wipe them away. She was too busy looking at all the evidence of David's love scattered around their bedroom. Months and months of tiny moments that she'd lived through without realizing someone was treasuring them, storing them up like precious things. There are so many, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I know. And that's just since we started dating. Imagine how many more there could be if we had our own place. Our own kitchen where you could hum while you cook. Our own couch where you could fall asleep during movies. Our own bed where you could steal all the blankets. Lisa laughed through her tears. I don't steal the blankets. You absolutely steal the blankets. David said, grinning. It's in my notes. I have evidence. She looked around the room one more time, taking in the full scope of what he created. The candles casting warm light on all their memories, the careful way he'd arranged everything, like he was building a shrine to their relationship, the wooden box with the key to their future sitting between them on the floor. "David," she said finally, "this is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever done for me." "Even though you saw it before it was finished?" he asked. "Even though I messed up the timing and you caught me sitting on the floor covered in tape?" "Especially because of that," Lisa said. "If you'd had everything perfect when I walked in, it would have been amazing. But seeing you work so hard to make something special for me, seeing how much thought you put into this, seeing you surrounded by all these memories you've been collecting, that's even better than perfect." She reached for the key, lifting it out of the box. It was warm from the candle light and heavier than she'd expected. "Can I see the place?" "Right now?" David asked, his face lighting up. "It's almost 10 o'clock. I don't care what time it is. I want to see our home." David scrambled to his feet, suddenly energized. "Really? You want to move in together?" "David, you just showed me that you've been writing down the way I hum while I cook. You remember the exact date I first told you I loved you. You noticed that I checked the locks twice. And instead of thinking I'm paranoid, you think it's sweet. Of course I want to move in with you." He pulled her up from the floor and spun her around, both of them laughing as they tried not to step on any of the memory papers. When he set her down, his face was serious again. "I love you," he said. "All of you, even the parts you think are weird or annoying, especially those parts." "I love you too," Lisa said, "and I'm glad I peeked." "You're glad you broke your promise?" David asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'm glad I got to see you like this, working so hard to show me how you feel, being nervous and excited and imperfect. If I'd waited for your big reveal, I would have missed all of that." David looked around the room, taking in the scattered papers and half-finished arrangements. "So you like it better messy?" "I like it better real," Lisa said. "Perfect is nice, but real is better." They spent the next hour sitting on the floor together, reading through every single paper. Some of the memories made Lisa laugh until her sides hurt, like the note about how she always sang along to commercials on the radio. Others made her cry happy tears, like the one about how she'd stayed up all night taking care of him when he had the flu, even though she had an important meeting the next day. By the time they'd read everything, it was almost midnight. But Lisa didn't feel tired at all. She felt energized, like she could stay up all night talking about their future together. "So," David said, holding up the key, "ready to go see our new place?" "Let's go," Lisa said, taking his hand out as they walked toward the door. David paused and looked back at the room full of memories. "Should we clean this up first?" Lisa squeezed his hand. "Later. Right now, I want to go start making new memories." They left the bedroom as it was, papers and candles and all, and walked out into the night together, the key to their future warm in Lisa's palm, and the promise of tomorrow bright ahead of them. Behind them, the candles continued to flicker in their bedroom, casting dancing shadows on all the written proof of their love. Every small moment, every tiny detail, every reason why they belonged together. And Lisa was right. Sometimes the most beautiful moments are the ones that happen when nobody's trying to be perfect. When someone's just trying to show you how much you matter to them in all the small, wonderful ways that make love real.